Hi, I'm Mark. In this video, I'm going to show you how to test for a bad spark plug in your small engine. The spark plug creates the spark needed to ignite the air-fuel mixture in your small engine. A spark plug is really a pretty simple device. It's made up of two electrodes that are isolated from each other by a ceramic insulator. One of the electrodes is all of this metal on the lower portion of the plug, as well as the bent strap that goes over the end of the plug. The second electrode goes through the center of the plug. It's exposed on this end where the ignition coil wire attaches, and the second electrode that extends out through the ceramic insulator. It's between the two electrodes that the spark is created. There's a couple of common spark plug problems. The most common problem is the spark plug simply gets coated with so much carbon and tar from a mistuned engine that there's not enough voltage to jump the gap between the electrodes. Another common issue is something internally inside the spark plug fails, allowing the spark to jump between the electrodes somewhere other than at the end where we want it to be. A spark plug that's heavily coated like this should just simply be replaced. If your spark plug looks fine, but you still suspect it's the problem preventing your engine from running, especially if your engine dies intermittently, then you may want to test the electrodes. There's two tests I can do with the multimeter to determine if the spark plug is bad. I've set the multimeter to measure ohms. First, I'm going to test for continuity in that internal electrode. I'll place one of the multimeter leads on the center electrode itself and the other end on the post on the opposite end of the spark plug. Because of oxidation and carbon buildup, sometimes you'll need to kind of rub the lead through that buildup to get a good reading. If the electrode is good, you'll see a reading on the multimeter. In this case, it's a fairly high reading, about 4,900 ohms, because this is a resistor type spark plug. They'll read higher than spark plugs without resistors. As long as you have some reading, you can assume that that electrode is good. The next test I'll do is to test between the two electrodes, or the two halves of the spark plug. This reading should be 0. This is testing for a damaged insulator. If I get a reading when I do this test, it would indicate that that insulator is cracked and voltage can leak through. Now, a multimeter isn't always going to be an accurate way to test for a bad plug, and that's because spark plugs operate at a very high voltage, often 10 to 12,000 volts. So a tiny crack in the ceramic insulator can be enough to allow that high voltage to leak from the inner electrode to the outer electrode, and the multimeter would never test that. So another test I like to do is a spark test. Now, this isn't going to test the spark plug directly. What it is a process of elimination. The spark tester is going to test the ignition coil. If we get good spark shown in the spark tester, and we don't suspect any other problems with the engine, such as low compression or a plugged carburetor, that will tell us that the spark plug is likely bad. Of course, another thing you can do is just simply replace the spark plug if you think it might be the problem, as plugs are relatively cheap. I'll show you real quick how to do a spark test. To use this, the first thing I need to do is access the spark plug. Now I'll remove the spark plug boot from the plug. And now I'll install the tester. I insert one side to the ignition coil, and the other side attaches to the spark plug. With the tester attached to the engine, I'll pull the engine over with the starter rope, and we should see a spark if the ignition coil is doing what it should. I see spark in the window, so I know the coil is good, and now I can eliminate it and move down the line to the spark plug. And that's a couple of ways that you can test the spark plug on your small engine.